Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Bar Cart Co-op. Alan and I have done, this is the 8th quarterly special that we've done. First thing we did Tale of Two Stills with Todd Leopold and Adam Stumpf. And Adam and his wife, Laura, recently had a baby boy. So congratulations to them. We did a show on non-traditional grains. We've done a show on wheat whiskey blind tastings. We did Borrowed Page, where we took the different elements of that American mash and grain blend and had each of the distillers on that contributed to that and talked through that wonderful blended whiskey. We did a show with Inside American Single Malt, where we had some of the best single malt distillers in the country get together, and we talked about where is that genre headed right now, and there's some really cool, interesting stuff that is happening there. And we did a show with Steve Beam down at Limestone Branch, where we talked with him about his experimental rye series, which is kind of going the way of the dodo bird, but hopefully we'll get that back at some point. And then the last show we did was with Chris Koenig out at Golden Beaver, where we tasted some of the new things that he's been distilling, and that was a lot of fun as well. But we're here tonight. We want to wish everybody a little early happy Thanksgiving. We appreciate you joining us. So what we're doing tonight is we started out talking about this Yeast Trial Series that Tom did out at Wollersheim, and we'll introduce Tom and the rest of the panel here in just a minute. But I've always been intrigued by what role yeast plays in the flavor of a whiskey. That gets, to me, it gets a bit of less attention than it deserves, but that's part of what we'll talk about here tonight. And then as we started going through those things and we started bringing in guests, we thought, why don't we talk about some brandies as well? So we'll have brandies from Tom at Wollersheim, from Robert Likarish at Ironroot, and from Alan Bishop at Spirits of French Lick. Also thought, let's bring in David Levine. He's the newest member of the Bar Cart Co-op. So we've got David with us as well. We have a great panel here tonight. So let's start out with some introductions. And Alan, we'll start with you and tell everybody about your shows on Bar Cart as well as just who you are.
First, let me point out that David wanted to join us. We could have blackmailed him into it. Like, it was possible that could have been a thing, but we didn't. He came to us.
He volunteered.
Yes. So now I don't know if Kevin explained to you that there's sort of a motorcycle gang process for getting blooded in or not, but just be prepared for the motorcycle process. It's coming. So yeah, that's what brothers do. So, but what am I supposed to do? Say who I am, what I do. I'm the distiller for Spirits of French Lick. I run the alchemistcabinet.com and also the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute on YouTube, where you can learn all about home distilling and some professional distilling and historic distillation protocols. And the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. That's all about the 14 and high strangeness and paranormal and all of that sort of stuff. And Distillers Talk with Christy Atkinson, where we get deep into the weeds with distillers of all stripes, whether they be, large scale professional distillers, small scale professional distillers, or even illicit home distillers from time to time.
Yeah. Good stuff. Alan, these shows are always fun to do with you, and I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Yeah, same here.
All right, David.
All right. So my name is David Levine. I'm the host of the Whiskey Ring podcast, as well as the main writer for whiskeyinmyweddingring.com. We do tasting notes, news, press releases, all of that. As Kevin said, newest member of the Bar Cart Co-op. And Alan, I'm sorry to tell you that, one, never ridden a motorcycle, but more importantly, Kevin did blackmail me into joining. It was just something that was illegal in Indiana, so he couldn't really tell you about it. So we'll keep that
very short list.
Oh, man. All right. Robert, welcome to the show. Appreciate your participation and being here. So tell us a little bit about yourself and Ironroot and what you got going on.
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the distillers down at Ironroot Republic in Denison, Texas. small family distillery. My brother's the head distiller. Mom's the big boss. And then dad kind of piddles around and does whatever needs to be done after that. So we've just turned 9 years old this last week. So I feel like survived, made it a little bit. Started adding to the team down at Ironroot. We specialize in making whiskeys, bourbons, brandies. Was taught by a number of French distillers on how to make spirits, and kind of the focus on us is basically taking a lot of those techniques and using them to make American spirits. So, yeah.
And everybody I've had the opportunity to meet from Ironroot is just fabulous, top-notch people. Your family's excellent. We've had Josh on the show a couple times. He's great. And you have a new employee, Shannon Hood.
Yeah.
Have you required Shannon to dye her hair red yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
We'll see how long she makes it before it happens, though.
All right. And Tom, last but certainly not least.
Sure. I'm Tom Lenerz. I'm the distiller here at Wollersheim Winery and Distillery. A lot of people probably outside of Wisconsin probably haven't heard of us. Small distillery and a winery here just north of Madison. I've been a distiller here since 2014. We've been distilling brandy since 2010, but in 2015 we opened the distillery and added on capacity to do whiskey and gin and absinthe and other products. But yeah, we've been making wine since 1972. Don't have a podcast or anything, so that's pretty much it for me.
Not everybody has a podcast now. Everybody has a podcast. Podcast or a blog. You got to have one of the two, Tom.
Yeah. I'm pretty, I keep a pretty low profile.
Yeah. Well, Wollersheim, if you've not been there, you need to make plans to go. It is a beautiful piece of property. And the winery aspect of it is a whole lot of fun. And what you're doing in the distillery, again, just some very creative things going on, one of which we'll be talking about here tonight. So kudos to you guys. I've not made it down to Ironroot yet, but I suspect that I'll correct that issue before too much longer. So if you hadn't guessed by now, I'm Kevin Rose. I host a show called Bourbon Turntable, where we blend the love of music with the love of whiskey. We have musicians on as guests. We have distillers on as guests. We have people like David on as guests, who surprisingly has a very deep, rich musical background, in addition to his encyclopedic knowledge of American spirits. So that's what I do. And right now, it just occurs to me that I'm looking a bit Amish tonight with my white shirt and my black suspenders and my golden beaver hat. That may be where the Amish ends for me, but
I wasn't going to say anything, but
you know how the Amish are with those beavers.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. So what we're talking about first tonight is this Wollersheim Rye Yeast Trial Series. And I ran into Tom and his bunch at Wollersheim back during Distill America, and they had these samples laid out, and I tried it, and I was just blown away. And one of the staff there at Wollersheim was gracious enough to let me come by the distillery early in the morning and purchase a set of the Yeast Trial Series bottles. And I've been saving them for an event like tonight. So, Tom, tell us how you came up with the idea of trying this, and then just kind of walk us through the process that you started.
Sure. So I guess like everything about the Yeast Series is the first time we've done a trial like this with the public, but as a winery for 50 some years, making wine in a non-traditional wine region like Wisconsin, we're constantly trialing various things, whether it be planting techniques or vineyard practices, to different things in the vineyard as well as in the winery side of things. And so that was the philosophy we took when we started the distillery. And I never like made whiskey commercially before, so I didn't know like this is exactly what we want to do. And so we've been experimenting since day one with, you know, fermentation temperatures, fermentation lengths, distillation proofs, barrel entry proofs, barrel chars, and all that type of stuff. And this was one of the first experiments that I had that I thought the results were pronounced enough and easy enough for everybody to kind of grok and understand that we could share it with the public. And so we've been making rye whiskey since 2015. Our first batch came out in 2018. It was a blend of like 6 barrels. And then since then, we had experimented a number of times with tweaking the mash bill, and we had that settled in. And we've been making this mash bill for a number of years. But one thing I really wanted to explore was generally rye has like an herbal characteristic to it, and in addition to the spice and everything. And I felt we had plenty of spice, we had plenty of like the sweet body and texture, but I was curious if selecting different yeasts could amplify some of that herbal note. And so doing this yeast trial was just for a way for me to find it out. And we did basically the same yeast, same varieties of rye, because we have tried Brasetto, Danko, as well as a couple other varietals of rye. So at the time, we were also experimenting with variety yeast or grain variety in addition to the yeast variety. And so it was actually 5 different barrels, 3 with 3 different grain strains or grain varieties, and then 3 with 3 different yeasts. And so the yeast variety series was the most interesting, and that's what we thought we'd share with everybody. So just 1 barrel of each. So we made about 30 cases per barrel. So we did pack up 30 variety packs and sent those to the market, and then the other 60 cases we sold in our retail space.
Okay, so what is the mash bill, the grain mash bill for these?
We've settled in on what I call our medium corn mash bill. So it's 2/3 rye, 22% corn, and then 12% malt barley. In the early days, I had originally done all rye and malt barley. It was like 75 or 80% rye to the rest barley. I did rye malt instead of rye malted barley. And then I also tried just like 10 or 11% corn. And I found, as far as like, I like a really rich, like full textured whiskey. And so we found that with that 22% corn, it was adding enough like heft and like mouthfeel without completely diluting the spice characteristic. And so that was kind of the recipe we ended up settling on.
Okay.
Awesome.
And all of these were 5 years old. They were all laid down about a week apart and all bottled about a week apart. And all independent stave char number 3 barrels. We did a lot of experimenting with that, but we have settled on with ISC the 18-month seasoned barrel with a pre-char toast. And so that is, all these are that barrel.
Interesting.
Nice.
It's great to see other distillers playing with yeast in general at this point in time, because for a long time that wasn't a thing that was happening at all. And
Right.
we've done a lot of it as well at Spirits of French Lick, and generally we have the yeast strains that we use, but what we'll do is the last couple runs of the same product. If we do 30 runs of one of our products, the last couple runs we will switch out, and the only variable we'll switch is what yeast that we use.
Sure.
Most often they're ones that we've collected ourselves and propagated ourselves from the old distilleries here in Southern Indiana, but very much along the same lines of what you were doing, was having the idea of doing a gift pack where people could really say, all right, here's 5 samples of Lee Sinclair. Nothing is different other than the yeast strain, and how does that affect things? And it's even just from the white dog perspective, there's a huge difference between the white dogs. And everybody always says, other distillers even, like, well, how much percentage do you think of that is going to exist after maturation? Right. And I've been surprised how much of it still exists after maturation. Night and day stuff. So
Yeah, and that, I mean, we have, so we're a family winery and distillery, and I work with, it's my wife's family. So my wife is 14th generation winemaker. Her father's side can trace winemaking back to the 1500s in southern France. And so he came here in the 80s, and he's very much driven with this philosophy of like explore and experiment and, you know, try to find what is not necessarily just best, but like what is your style, and like what is representative of us. And so when, you know, talking to a winemaker about making whiskey, and it goes, well, what yeast are you going to use? And it's like, well, I'm going to use the yeast for American whiskey because there's one. You know, he brings out the Scott Lab book that's this thick with, you know, 70, 80 varietals of yeast for different, you know, different wines and things like that. It is very different. We had this initially, we did the same exact thing with like corn. You know, it was like, what kind of corn should we buy for the distillery? And it was like, well, yellow number 2 dent. Well, number 2 dent isn't a corn, you know, it's a grade.
It's a commodity.
So,
yeah,
it's a commodity. And so we experimented with just like regular, yellow number 2 dent from our warehouse manager whose farm's a mile away. But we grew like heirloom varieties of white corn, blue corn, and red corn. And then we experimented with like a Pioneer food grade white corn. And that's what we really settled in on, as like, that's the corn we like to use. We like the quality it gets, and like our farmers like growing it. So it's, you know, we didn't know until we started trying, and that was kind of how we went. And so every step of the process has been, you know, part of that. And it's been 8-9 years of experimenting, and we're like kind of have everything decided, but there's still room to play around with things.
Okay. So real quick question here too on this stuff, and going through it, we're obviously going to see some of the differences, but one variable that we did start playing with just out of curiosity, and it still hasn't come completely to fruition, some of the barrels have, but we did play with our barrel entry proof a little bit with some of the different yeast strains, because I felt like there was a lot of interplay between how that was going to mature and the barrel entry proof. So
Sure.
I don't know if you've done any of that stuff with it or not, but
that wasn't something I controlled too heavily with this experiment. I do believe one of them had a slightly higher barrel entry proof, and that was like to get it to fit into 2 barrels or something like that. I was like, you know, so I went in a little bit higher. In hindsight, that is a variable, especially with rye whiskey, I've been wanting to play with more, because we make the one mash bill, and we bottle our round top rye, which is our like everyday sip-in and cocktail rye at 90 proof. And with that, I found I really like that 114 proof entry proof. But I personally really enjoy it at cast strength. And I thought that I would really like those 114 entry proof, because that's going to be in that like 116, 118, still really approachable, at least for me as a distiller. Like, it's still very approachable cast strength versus, you know, like that hazmat or, you know, 130 or something like that. But I found that as far as like at cast strength, the stuff that I've entered north of 120 for cast strength single barrel picks, I prefer. But when I'm proofing down to 90 proof for my blends, I prefer the lower entry proof. So we're actually starting, when we're laying down our rye inventory, the same batch, I'm splitting it up, some with that lower entry proof and some with that higher entry proof. So I have the option for either blending in one way or the other at the blending point, or I have those high proof barrels for a single barrel.
And I should add there too that I should modify what I said just slightly, so because it makes me sound smarter than I really am. But what actually happened was we went to a higher entry proof on some of those, as I recall, because we knew that they were those yeast strains were going to throw off profile from what was normal. So we figured if we were going to throw them off profile, they're for sure going to be at least available as a single barrel if they're any good. So if we had a little higher proof, then that makes it, you know, because our entry is so low anyways. So
yeah. What do you guys do for entry usually?
105 typically.
105. That's pretty low, yeah.
Tom, I was going to ask you on the yeast trials. Did you at all play around with like highest temperature you allow the ferments to get to, or like length of time of ferment? Or
so we have all jacketed fermenters, and we ferment about 76 degrees. And so the main alcoholic ferment's still done in about 3 days or 4 days, but we let it sit for 6 or 7 days before distilling. So there is time for, other stuff to have its fun. But yeah, that was consistent across all three. We didn't adjust the fermentation profiles beyond that. I did just get a new still, so I'm going to be laying down a lot more inventory, so I might be able to play around with some more of these experiments. But
you said you're using jacketed fermenters, so I'm assuming you're using stainless steel?
Yeah, all stainless.
Yep. You said you let some other stuff go past the 3 or 4 days, so normally I think hear that and I think, oh, it's got some malolactic stuff in there, but
yeah,
probably not in the stainless steel then.
Not well. So we keep a pretty clean facility, but we can definitely taste the difference on a 3-4 day finished ferment and a 6-7 day finished ferment on distilling. We are still a winery, and so there is a lot of other stuff floating around. But on the wine side of things, we have a very strict cleaning profile procedure for both sides. But on the wine side, we do ozone each tank before use, and so that will kill any microbes. Whereas with our cook process, we're only going up to like 185, and then we're adding the malt back. And so there is just, especially with the malt, anything lingering on the malt is still theoretically active, and then just stuff in the facility, which the distilling side of our facility is much smaller than our wine side. So.
What you're supposed to say is the malolactic that they get off of the malt helps improve the wine. That's what I tell our winemakers. And then I'm like, you're welcome.
Yeah. My wife's master's is in food science. She has she's an enologist. And so she's way smarter than I am. So I don't think I can pull that off on her, but that's like her job is like monitoring malolactic and all that.
Very cool.
Right. Well, let's get into tasting these ryes, and we will start, gentlemen, with sample number 1 that you have, which is labeled on the bottle Colonial D514. Tom, I've got to assume that's probably the yeast.
That's the yeast strain, yeah.
Yep.
That's a White Star is the company.
Okay. And we'll just nose this, taste this, and you guys can comment on this Colonial. It is, as Tom mentioned, aged 5 years. It is 121 proof.
So on the nose already, I get a little bit of like that. It's not lavender and it's not lavender. I've been picking this up on a few ryes here lately, but almost like a jasmine flower or even like a jasmine rice sort of characteristic that's coming across, which on a rye in particular, I absolutely love versus, I've talked about 95.5s a lot in the past and that kind of black cherry thing that I'm not big on in general. So really like the nose on this already, but it's that jasmine rice, but it's also got a little punch to it. It's not an alcohol punch. It's a almost a meatiness sort of thing to it. So
yeah, getting a lot of like juicy fruit gum, the individually packaged ones that have like the powdered sugar and cornstarch mixture on the outside of them.
That's a fancy fat kid tasting note right there, David. I'm gonna put that in my arsenal next time I have a barrel pick, man. That's coming out. That's going in the book. Thank you, sir.
It's not those low class juicy fruits.
Right. Right. I just know juicy fruit. I don't. Robert, anything on the nose you get?
I think for me, the biggest thing is just like how potent the nose was. It's really, there are a lot of the Kentucky ryes tend to be way subtler on the nose. This guy comes out and greets you. I love that.
Yeah. I've got to tell on myself for just a second. I was pouring out these samples, and then I was going to take a photo and post it on Instagram. with the glasses and the bottles, and I got the glasses mixed up. So I thought, well, I don't remember which one was in what glass. So I did a blend. I poured them all into one glass, and as I'm doing that, the aroma from these ryes just was wafting everywhere, and it was fantastic. So
that's pretty special on the palate too. So that's already just there on the entry. Like that's a powerful drink, and it's got a lot of sort of almost nutmeg characteristics, but like nutmeg when you actually distill nutmeg into a botanical spirit. And then there is a dark fruit in there on the palate, but to me it comes off almost like blackberry cobbler with a real heavy dose of nutmeg and a little cinnamon there. Doesn't come off as black pepper. If anything, there might even be a slight little kind of cinnamon cayenne note, like a red hot sort of thing at the very beginning. But then I would almost be, I don't know. That one's very, very chewy. I really like that mouthfeel a lot.
Yeah, that one was really popular. I think that was the first of the three to sell out here in our store when people taste them side by side.
It's so like textured. I keep thinking on my first taste, it almost tasted like it was carbonated in a way. And the way that just sharpness hits you in the back of the throat.
Yeah. I haven't tried that yet, but I've been tempted.
Yeah, my initial reaction whenever I took it on too, kind of the carbonation thing, David. But I was thinking, I struggled to find the nutmeg note there that I was, trying to put my finger on. My initial reaction was a little like kind of a Dr. Pepper soda thing going on here on the entry. So,
yeah, I see. It goes kind of cola straight into like, to me, big fruit on the mid palate. Like you don't see that a lot with rye. That's really, really cool.
No. Not unless you're dealing with like a malted rye or something. This, I think I'd be, if this was in a blind, I'd have a hard time not thinking there was a fairly heavy proportion of malted rye going on here.
What about the finish? I got a little tobacco on the finish. Anybody else?
I'm the wrong person to ask.
There's a
like
little,
every time I say there's a tobacco note, I'm totally off.
There's a little cedar box on there, and I would even say that I might even get specific and go with like a little bit of a pine sort of note that comes at the very, very back, a really high note on that finish. And then the way it just the mouthfeel continues on the finish, particularly on the palate. There's a lot of oils on there, a lot of really beautiful volatiles just still hanging around. It's a very elevated rye, for sure, but not elevated in that, again, black pepper sort of characteristics that a lot of ryes have. So,
Tom, when you guys, what still type are you using? Are you using like a traditional pod? Are you using a hybrid? What do you?
We're using a hybrid. We have a 250 gallon Vendome. This was distilled on that. We just added a 500 gallon Vendome as well with the column on top. The 250 is got a Brandy helmet on the side, and then it goes into the column. And we do everything in single pass distillation. So there's no stripping run or anything like that. So yeah, we pull off those hearts about 150 proof on average, and then proof down for entry. So the one thing to note, this yeast called for twice the pitch rate of the other yeast. And so this one I only was able to produce, like I bought just like one block. I produced basically one barrel of this one and two of the rye yeast from that company as well. So I don't know, that might be contributing some of that heft and those oils. It was very
heavy pitch.
Yeah, heavy yeast, heavy pitch.
Yeah, the single pass definitely explains some of the aromatics that you're hanging on to that are so heavy there. I'm really surprised on the single pass that you got that mouthfeel that you did off of that. That's really impressive on single pass on a hybrid for sure. That's awesome. What I'm curious, do you remember, and I know as a distiller it's hard to remember these sort of things, but what your impression of this was when it first came off the still as a white dog?
I actually, I don't remember there being that distinct of a difference between the three as the White Dog, or at least, I mean, as a 150 proof White Dog with everything that was going on. Maybe I didn't give it I didn't spend a ton of time with it,
Right.
but I was like, oh yeah, it's different, but whatever. You know, like I don't take a ton of detailed notes on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. See, that's interesting because I think too that maturation factor is definitely, not only is the yeast still having an effect over time, but I think the maturation factor is actually amplifying the effect to some degree with what we've seen. I mean, the biggest place. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, when I was tasting through, like at 2 years and 3 years and stuff, I was like, well, these barrels all taste different, but they all taste different, you know. And it's just like they're all in different kind of spots in the aging, and then usually at that 4 or 5 year mark, they all start evening out. And these were like, you know, way different directions. And so,
yeah. Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on the Colonial?
I guess this may be spoiling for the other ones, but this is admittedly my first time tasting Wollersheim, so I look forward to tasting more. I'm getting a ton in the finish, the palate, everything is sitting on the back half of my tongue, which is kind of unusual. Like most stuff hits on the front half, and mid palate. So is that kind of characteristic of your ryes, that they have a more full tongue experience?
That's what I'm going for. I'm looking to have that's the type of whiskey I like, is that heavy textured, you know, spirit. A common comment I get from a lot of people in the whiskey world is like, I tell them it's like, oh, this is cask strength, it's 123 proof, and they're like, it doesn't drink like 123 proof.
Right.
Like that's a very common thing. I don't know what I'm doing to do that, but a lot of people, like at 100 proof, people think it tastes like it's even lower, or at cask strength they think it's closer to 100 or whatever. So
well, I'll throw you,
that seems to be a consistent thing.
I'll throw you a weird one here that I think Kevin and David could comment on more than what I can, but honestly, I think that this particular rye has got some characteristics that would speak to some bourbon drinkers that don't normally like rye. There's a profile to this rye, and you guys can tell me if I'm way off base here. This is what Knob Creek wished that their bourbon tasted like, as opposed to, because that, and I don't mean that in a bad way. That Knob Creek note is there, but it's very pronounced here, and it's elegant here. It's coming off well, but that's the closest commercial thing I can think of that has some of those similar notes to it. So
yeah, that's the thing. Like you mentioned earlier, like those 95.5 ryes, like I don't shame any distiller for, you know, buying and bottling what they need to bottle.
Sure.
You know, as they're getting started. But like we have the luxury as a family winery that's established. Like we're not going to do that. We don't want to have to like manage that transition.
Right.
And so we just set out to make something that, again, is like uniquely us. And this mash bill in general is relatively unique. And so a lot of people are like, well, your rye doesn't taste like rye. I've tried like 20 ryes, and it's like, well, they're all MGP, but you know, so it's that choice, you know, the illusion of choice. And so there is sometimes that understanding. But as far as like our crew here, the people who work in our distillery, they way over index into the rye. I think like almost all of our people's favorite product is the rye. And I don't know. I mean, I like it a lot.
It's good. It's very good.
That's super elegant. Again, so many ryes come off. They have like almost tastes like it has like the chaff from around the grain still in there. And this is elegant and beautiful. And again, doing it in a single pass with all of the heaviness to it. That's really cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. A lot of times with rye, I'll get, you hear people talk about, well, it tastes like a rye bread. Okay. Or you get a dill note out of it, or you get a lot of black pepper out of it. And I don't get any of those with this. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a very good thing.
Yeah. This objectively just tastes like a rye, which should just be appreciated sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Agreed.
All right. You ready to move on to the American? that would be number 2 in your sample kit.
Yep. And that's the standard yeast. That's like that's what's available for American whiskey yeast. It's what we use for our rye pretty much all the time. I have started buying some more of these after the results of this, and I am laying down little lots of it with the other yeast just as a option to blend or option to do a single barrel smoke.
Right.
It's much more soft on the nose initially, much more like kind of that baked bread sort of characteristic, or even a little doughiness to it on the nose. But thankfully, still not any of that black pepper thing, not any of that like dark black cherry thing. And also this is interesting too, not leaning towards lavender, right? Because the only other experience a lot of people have other than 95.5 is 51%, and or what Leopold has done with the 3-chamber, going very heavy lavender. And this is again proof that rye is way more than what people have made it out to be. So
you have me wanting to jump into the spice cabinet. There's a leafy green herb in here that I cannot for the life of me pick out. It's gonna bug me. It's not a usual one that you get with a high herbaceous rye.
I could definitely see that.
This is 114.8 proof, by the way. Is there some clove in this on the nose? There's something
like eugenol, little numbingness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a softer experience coming in, almost like velvety on the nose, even. It falls through on the palate too, but it's like it's weird to say. It has like a textured nose that's got very, very comforting, I guess.
Yeah, there's a holiday spice sort of characteristic to that as well, but not nearly as heavy. But then there's also a sweetness, like a candied sort of sweetness, almost. And I hesitate to use the word because it doesn't have this particular flavor, but my brain goes there for some reason. But a little bit of that anise characteristic on the palate in particular. Yeah. That sweetness, like that anise shortbread cookie sort of thing, right? It has some of that going for it for sure. But there's that savory note in there though too that you guys are picking up on, and I'm getting it too, but I cannot put my finger on exactly what I'm thinking it is.
Yeah. For the tasting card for these, like I don't try to give people tasting notes because then you always have people argue with you about I get that or whatever. So all I did for the colonial is I said herbal and floral, and then with this one I think I just said like balanced and spicy or something like that. Just but yeah, this one just of the three was more round, more balanced, more.
Go
ahead, Kevin.
There's like a meatiness to this, like it's you're pulling off the edge of some
dry aged steak.
Yeah, something.
Cutting it off.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
I think that's where it's kind of leading me. Like I'm almost thinking like a shepherd's pie. You get either lamb or a beef filling, but I always throw a ton of thyme and rosemary in there.
That makes sense.
I think if you mix thyme and rosemary together, that's kind of the flavor that I'm getting. Okay. Little lemony, little woody stem, slightly savory, and even tiny bit soapy, but not in a bad way.
I think you guys are on the absolute right track on that. Maybe even like a little bit of a protein thing, Robert, like sort of the playing around with the Pachuga thing that I played around with here at the house, that kind of fattiness and like a fat wash cocktail sort of characteristic. This is the bottle that would get me in trouble. The other one I would savor and not share with anybody, but this is the one. This is the one where I would just be drinking it and not realize that it's 2:00 in the morning.
It's been known to happen.
Yeah. Thoughts on the finish?
It's 7 points lower, but I'm getting more proof on this than I got on the first one.
So interestingly enough, I don't know if did you guys pick up on this, and of course everybody's palate's different, but the first one was very much that like big hit of almost like cinnamon nutmeg up front and bright. This one, it's there, but it's right on the tip of the tongue, and then it immediately goes to that candied thing all the way down the sides. The oiliness comes across the middle. On the XL in particular, I got just a slight little, almost like lemon pepper sort of thing going on the XL.
Yeah.
On this one.
Yeah, I'm getting almost like verbena on this one, which I haven't ever picked up in our rides before. So I don't know.
I like it.
Interesting.
I like
just tonight. Or
what's fun is the other one to me had, again, the kind of the fruitiness throughout the mid palate. And this one, you don't see that all. The fruit on this is all citrus to me, which is really fun to see those differences.
Like it. In terms of the response in the distillery gift shop, when consumers have come in and they've tried the three, is there one that stood out as a fan favorite there?
Like I mentioned before, I think the Colonial sold the quickest of the three. We have a lot of spirits, and our tasting flight is like pick three. And so we had a featured flight that was like all three of these, and then like another featured flight that was like one brandy, one of our bourbons, and one rye. And they're like, well, I want to try one of those single barrel ryes. Which one's the most popular or whatever? And so everybody like kind of people, not very many people wanted to commit to doing the full flight. I know some people did, but I would say probably half our guests just like tried whichever one those tasting notes suggested, or whichever, like the three pairings or the three notes they connected with the most. So
okay.
Going back to that one on the palate, that time I was let it set for a little longer on the palate, and whereas the first one had some of that sort of cedar box tobacco, even pine at the back. What I was missing on this a while ago was letting it set on the palate for a little while. I got almost a little like juniper and maybe even a little bit of like orange oil on the front of the palate on this one. And I think that's what had thrown me from the last one, because all that was kind of at the back, and here it's there at the front, but more on the finish than anything else. So
a lot of it sounds like we're all throwing out some sort of botanical notes on this one. Is that a fair statement?
I'd almost think like, what would happen if you finished a rye in a gin barrel for 3 months or something?
I don't know, but that's happening tomorrow. Thank you, David.
All right. Well, let's go to the third and final in the Yeast Trial Series, and that is the rye yeast strain. So,
yep. Again, the Colonial and the rye were both from White Star.
Sounds almost buttery on the nose comparatively to the other ones.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like not like diacetyl butter, but more like a butter cake sort of.
Yeah.
Now who's throwing out the fat kid notes? Come on now.
Listen, I'm one step away from putting a frozen strawberry in this thing and calling it a night, boys.
I get some like cinnamon red hot on this.
Yeah.
I mean, a ton of strawberry. And that was before Alan said that.
I like how David's already edited himself. That was before Alan said that.
Like, to me, I guess with kind of like buttery cake, strawberry, you're looking, strawberry shortcake, I think pretty spot on for me on this.
And I like too on here, the other two as well. So I was surprised at how soft the noses were, especially like with aggression and with ethanol on the single pass that you're doing. And you have to dig for it here, but there's a little bit more of an aggressive note on the nose on this one, which I thoroughly enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, this one I personally like. I get that red hot and like cookies and like it It reminds me a lot of like an Amberana cask
It does.
type finish without the Amberana cask. So it's much more affordable to make. But,
It's what people who finish an Amberana wish Amberana actually tasted like. That's going to be my new go-to tasting note. This is what such and such wishes it tasted like. But there's the cinnamon, the Ceylon cinnamons on there. There's a Boston Red Hot sort of characteristic to it that's really nice. There's even like a rock candy sort of characteristic there. I think that sweetness kind of comes through on that.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Yeah.
And there's some red fruit punch rolling in on the back end.
There you go. Yeah.
I got some ginger on this.
Oh, see what he did there, Robert? Jeez.
Shout out Ironroot.
Right. I'm gonna make a ginger flavored whiskey at some point.
Man, that's good.
Mhm.
They all have an excellent mouthfeel. And for me, that's a huge thing with anything I'm going to drink is having mouthfeel to them. And these all have it. And the exhale on that, there's definitely that like Boston Red Hot thing going on there, but you don't get any of it, going down whatsoever. It's just on that exhale that comes to the forefront. Really like that.
Yeah. This one's 120.2 proof. So it's in between the three.
I'd be interested to, and I've got enough left over here. I'm going to do it in a little while. I'd be interested to see what 1 and 3 blended together would do. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And this was my favorite of the three, just because it was so different from what we normally see.
It's very distinct.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one when I tried it at Distill America, I tried the 3. When I tried this one, I said, "Oh, that was so distinct from the other two." And again, tasting whiskey in that environment is not necessarily the best. Little cups, and but this one stood out as being so different that I felt, okay, this kind of proves the thought of yeast having a significant role in the flavor of a whiskey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The more I go back to that, the more of that like old-fashioned cinnamon homemade rock candy that I'm pulling from it. There's obviously some dark tonality there from the barrel and from the tannins and the structure, but that's phenomenal. That's really, really nice.
This one's giving me the most kind of clove and eugenol on there. My lips are going a little bit numb, and I kind of like it.
Yeah, I'm not getting so much the lips, but I'm getting the tip of the tongue. Definitely getting some of that numbness, almost like an anise sort of character. Again, not so much in the flavor, but just in the actual effects itself. But
So what is it that causes that effect when you're tasting a whiskey?
I defer to Robert. I have no idea. I really have no clue.
It's the bonds breaking. I honestly have no idea either on that one.
I think it's the alls, like mannitol, menthol.
I'm going to mention it 100% on One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, and I promise you that some jackass will pretend like they know,
yes,
what it is, and then I'm going to read that email and give you guys a shout out on it because, yes,
yeah. So if you're out there and you know what causes that numbing effect, please let us know. Please share your wisdom with us.
Actually,
PhD and BS.
Alan, you know who might know that?
Who's
Genuinely?
That?
Who? Henrik, the guy I just introduced you to.
Yeah, he would be a good one to ask for sure. I would trust him over top some of these people for sure. So yes,
Especially
I would touch base with him.
Cannot trust them.
Listen, Reddit Firewater knows everything. Everything.
So we've tried the 3. What are your thoughts in terms of compare and contrast, and any commentary on the impact of yeast with the flavor of the whiskey?
It's as clear as it can be. There's a difference between all three of these, and it's discernible even after maturation, and it's a huge impact after maturation. And obviously I'm easy to convince because I'm already convinced of it ahead of time. But more importantly, and I want to say this for all three of these are phenomenal of their own accord. There's not a bad one in the bunch, and they all three have a different sort of mood and sort of setting to them, and a different time and place where I would drink each one of them depending on what it was, and the fact that it's just yeast that does that, amazing.
Yeah, Tom, was there any other difference between the yeasts other than that the Colonial needed double the pitch rate?
No, I think they all. I mean, we ran our ferments all the same, and maybe. I mean, now I'm sparking all these ideas, but like, there is like, well, could it just be like this random barrel? The wood is contributing all this cinnamon, and it just so happened to be that the rye yeast went in there. So now I'm like, well, do I need to do 5 of each and try like different fermentation temperatures? And
the answer is always yes.
So yeah, I think I got some ideas cooking around now.
Yeah. My vote is Kvike yeast. Hit it with Kvike yeast and go to 105 and just see what happens.
We never go that high. I don't know. I mean, it's pretty cold up here in Wisconsin. I don't know if we can keep it that hot.
Right.
Maybe in the summer. But
the only thing that I could think that I would recommend is the next time you do this, set aside enough white dog that if you're a real dork right here, and David, you can try the white dog alongside the matured product.
Yeah,
I think that would be fascinating.
If you guys still have 1 and 3 left, any of it, just 50-50 blend. Really nice. Really, really nice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you still get all those beautiful confectionery notes up front, and then you get that cinnamon really pushing at the back of the palate. You get a little more tannic structure out of it too between the 2 barrels, but it's gorgeous.
That nose goes so savory for me. Like,
Tom,
mashed potatoes and steak.
I'm gonna be honest, man. I'm super impressed with every single one of these. So this is great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. If you do that blend, it's like the juicy fruits on the nose, and the Trident cinnamon gum is on the palate.
Yeah, there you go. Tom, just like Robert said, honestly, super impressed by all these.
Thank you.
I couldn't begin to touch one of those with a single pass distillation. I already know my skill set. There's no way that's happening. It's not happening on a single pass for me. So
yeah. We're not very patient around here, so I don't have the patience to do 2 passes. I think is mostly what it is. But yeah, it's just kind of how we've always done it, and we kind of
it's working.
Our cuts dialed in, and
don't change it.
I know other distillers are like, oh, I'd love to do that, or I'd love to get rid of doing all those stripping runs, get more capacity, but I don't know. You guys are welcome to come hang out and run with us sometime if you're up this way. So,
well, what this speaks to is the quality of overall distillation at Wollersheim, and I was up there last fall, I believe, for the first time, and got to try your bourbon, your rye, your brandy, and everything is just absolutely top notch.
Thank you.
So if you can find a way to get your hands on anything from Wollersheim, do it.
Well, the whiskey's good when you clean your glass with water and the whiskey holds up to the damn water. So
yes, man, that's good stuff. Really good stuff. Any other thoughts on Yeast Trial Series, impact of yeast to flavor of the whiskey?
Keep it going, and I hope other distillers out there pay attention to this and they start doing the same thing. I mean, that's probably, we've all had the grain conversation at this point. We all know that grain affects distillation. We all know the style still affects distillation. Distillers are still a little bit off about yeast sometimes. You know, I think some of that has to do with some of the big industrial consulting that happens out there. But play with it. If you're not worried about, if you're not on a huge scale, you're not losing 5 barrels a day. You're losing 5 gallons a day at the most, right? That's whatever. Figure it out, but keep playing with it. I mean, you know, we're starting to even see it some in Scotland and Ireland now. Finally, you know, the place where they swore for years yeast had nothing to do with anything other than making alcohol. So, yeah,
I think every variable can make a difference, and you know, Scotland was doing the same thing too, where like variety of barley is not gonna, like they were saying for years that variety doesn't make a difference in 12-year-old spirit. And I don't know, I haven't ran that experiment, but it seems from the winemaking standpoint of things, it's like, you know, they're talking about limestone soil versus, you know, red granite soil, same grapes, same, you know, same winemaker, same everything, same microclimate, like difference in soil is making a difference. Like, it seems like other things would make a difference for spirits for sure.
Absolutely.
Everything matters.
Yeah.
And tell people who come into tasting rooms and who listen to podcasts and read reviews, ask about the yeast.
Yeah.
Like Alan was saying, like we've started asking more about the grain, maybe even about the barrels, but yeah, ask about the yeast. It's such a huge differentiator.
How many of us, Robert, you know this, as distillers, we sort of back-ended into farmers by becoming distillers, which is backwards from the past, you know, 500 years of distillation. Now, how many of us are accidentally becoming microbiologists? You know, all it takes is that first microscope purchase.
I'll leave that to my brother on that
one. How deep down the rabbit hole does one want to go? All the way.
Yeast is what Bruce Springsteen claims to be, and that's the blue collar artist. Okay, because
we were all
what a save! What a
a
save that was! Like that felt like that was going to be a huge reach, and you saved that one big time, brother.
Yeast has its blue collar job is turning sugar into alcohol, but the artistic job is the flavor that it brings to the whiskey. And you know, it's no poser like the boss.
It's not a Johnny Cougar.
It is not a Johnny Cougar at all. This
I think it's the Garfunkel, and it's really the Simon.
I'm going to get an eviction notice tomorrow from the state of Indiana. It's not even for the house. It's going to be for the whole state. You have to leave now.
Leave now. Oh man. All right. So let me ask one more question about the impact of yeast. Does its impact on flavor diminish the longer it's matured in the barrel, or do you think that holds through?
For me, like I mentioned before, I really feel, you know, in the early days of tasting samples, like we see a lot of variety, and then usually once we hit 4 to 5 to 6 years, which is when we're bottling, the variance, especially with our bourbon and rye, because it's all new barrels, like the variance from barrel to barrel in the same batch is really quite negligible. And so to see such variance of these 3 whiskeys all 1 week apart from each other, sure seems to indicate that it's not diminishing. It could also just be a timing thing. Like, I don't know, maybe it does go up and down, and there might be a spot, you know, maybe at 6-7 years where the wood is overpowering things, or, you know, things like that. But for me, at least in this situation, the timing was right. We were interested in bottling it up, and they were so unique, and I had the choice of like bottling it up and not telling people that they were a yeast series and just releasing them one after the other, or just bottling all 3 and telling people. And that we decided to tell people. And like I said, we've done dozens and dozens of trials like this, and usually it's like a 15-minute conversation with me and my father-in-law and my wife will taste samples and go, we like this and this, and next time we're going to try this and blah blah blah. We move on, but this was something we really felt like we needed to share with people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think if for most of us that are on the smaller side, the three of us that are distillers on here, I think probably if you were to take especially anything pot distilled or hybrid distilled out to 9-10 years, it would start to get the barrels automatically going to just start stepping in pretty heavily on pot distilled stuff, in my opinion.
Whatever.
right. But I think at that 5, 6, 7 year mark, yeah, that yeast you're getting that flavor bridging, right? You're getting all the contrast of what the yeast is bringing. And this also brings another experiment to mind, right? So you think about traditional Canadian distilling. Instead of having mash bills, you have individual component whiskeys, 100% corn, 100% rye, etc.
Right.
Having these yeast strains and using them in the same mash bill is the same idea, but it's a different variable that you're using to make those blends in the long run. And I can see some really cool things coming out of that just, I think that it would blow consumers' minds for sure, especially the ones that are more into this and are going to support our kind of distilleries in the first place. The people who want to hear about these yeast experiments, they're the people that are going to buy every bottle you ever put out, right? They're the ones that are going to really support what you're doing. So,
yeah, I mean, I think you can look at some of the like older rums with some of the ester profiles that just they hold up
different marks.
Even at 10 and 12 years. Look at some of the stuff that Four Roses has done with some of their different yeast selections. Like, yeah, you can still see those differences at 10, 12, 14 years.
Yep.
The age rums is a good point. It's like those esters, when you're reaching 20, 25 years on those rums, they're still there in full force.
Oh, yeah.
They don't die off like the creosotes from a peat that, tend to die off over time.
Yeah.
But the ester contours just keep going.
Yeah, they let you know they're there.
Next morning too.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
All right. Let's taste some brandy. How about that?
All right, let's do it.
We've not had enough whiskey already tonight, so let's switch over to a different spirit. And we'll start with Dionysus.
Trash.
I heard it's made with Catawba.
Yeah, we licensed that name of grape from Sammy Hagar.
It's made with Indiana water. I wouldn't,
Oh, yeah. I would hate for you to drink anything off of higher quality limestone than what you currently are used to. I'm just saying.
Shots fired. I love it.
I will tell you guys up front that this is and I'm very interested to see Robert's reaction to this. It's a very weird brandy. So Catawba is highly, highly phenolic. You tend to pick it at a higher brix. It's the closest thing that it comes to would be something like Muscat Alexander. Very, very perfumey, very big, very in your face. Not something you're going to sit down and drink a whole lot of at one time. More of a dessert sort of drink. So
it's like tons of peach.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
it's gorgeous.
Our press house brandy, which is not in the flight, we do with a blend of American native grapes, Catawba, Delaware, Niagara, some other stuff, and we get a lot of apricot, a lot of peach.
That foxy characteristic that some people sort of take that, especially like Niagara. You can sometimes get almost a little like petrol sort of thing off of it. And this though, for me, and I'm going to refrain from giving too many tasting notes on it, let you guys go through it. But this for me was a little bit of a return to form after Copper and Kings, because I had not released an aged grape brandy since then. And this wasn't the oldest one that we have. We have 2 barrels that are older than this, but this one was pretty special because there were 2 master venter barrels. I can't remember which cooperage they came from in France that the Doties had bought years ago, and they forgot about them. They were sitting in a corner of the winery, falling apart. They were literally the barrels that have the grapevines around them instead of the normal barrel hoops.
Yeah.
And I pulled them out, and the owner was like, no, you can't use those for distillate. I'm going to use them for wine. I'm like, right now, you're not going to use them for shit because they're falling apart. So I talked him in and let me take him down to Kelvin Cooperage. We had him put a new toast on one of them, and we had him put a number 2 char on French oak. And this is a blend of those 2 barrels at 4 years old, and the first bottled and bond Catawba to be made in Indiana since Prohibition. So,
dude, that's gorgeous.
It's so filling on the mouthfeel.
I'll say this: when I first opened this bottle, there was a lot of citrus in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That citrus has modified to be that peach, that apricot.
Yep.
Mhm.
Volatile component for sure.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wild.
Really, really fruity. And both, so they're used barrels, but they both had fresh toast and jar.
They were actually never used in the first place. They just bought them
really?
and bought them and set them. And I think the only reason I had them do a heavier toast because it was a light toast on the one, and then I had them char one because that was something that I was playing with at Copper and Kings before I left, and I thought, well, this would be, if any brandy's going to hold up to a char on a French oak barrel, Catawba will hold up to it because it's such a big, heavy duty. And ironically, this is the yeast strain for this was one that we captured from the old McCoy distillery here in Orange County, Indiana. That we used from a wild culture that we made ourselves. So
Awesome.
What's crazy is your description of it with the big phenolic, and there's a little bit of phenol in there, but I was expecting, I've had a lot of like orange muscat brandies that are just off the charts phenol.
Mhm.
And this is way better balanced than any of those guys. I love it, man. It's got great fruit to it, great
Thank you.
body. How old is this, if you don't mind me asking?
4.
4?
Yep. 4.
There's a funk in the nose too. There's something funky in there.
Yeah. There's a vegetal that comes across from
Yeah.
Catawba that can kind of go into sort of some of that mezcal sort of territory, just especially in the white spirit that comes off the still. It can go into mezcal territory real quick. In fact, that's what we use the white version of this for at the distillery, is for agave based drinks.
Mhm.
So
Oh, okay.
but
You
cool.
you bottle and sell a unaged brandy?
we've done a couple of them. They're not huge sellers. They become more cocktail components than anything else for the distillery. There's a few people here and there. You get a few people specifically. We have a pretty good proportion of Eastern European folks that live in Bloomington, and they're pretty big fans of the white brandies that we make. But going into distribution,
Yeah.
people don't know. They don't know what to do with it. They don't have any idea, and you can't get your margins down low enough to compete with any other white spirit. So it's not really, this literally these 2 barrels. By the time you add it up, you're looking at almost 15 barrels of whiskey that we could have made instead of the 2 barrels of Catawba.
Yeah.
Brandy is definitely a passion project at the end of the day.
It is. And I wish I'd had thought of it and sent you guys we actually took these barrels and finished some Matty Gladden high rye bourbon in these barrels. It turned out well. And unfortunately, I think the front of the house, there was a little miscommunication. They released the Matty Gladden finished in these barrels before they released these barrels. So telling the story's been a little convoluted, but it's definitely an interesting spirit.
Were there 30 bottles of those?
32.
32. Wow.
32.
You guys getting prolific there.
Shut up, Kevin. Don't have anything to do with that stuff. Gee.
Oh man, that's super fun. Like the American varietals have such like crazy results on brandy.
Mm-hmm. Well, one that I would like to do one of these days, and I don't know anybody that's growing enough of it to be able to get a hold of it to do it, but what put Indiana on the map as the first wine producing state commercially was the Cape grape.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to get enough of the Cape grape to be able to do something. And I don't think you'd be able to make just a straight double pot stilled brandy out of it. I suspect because it's so tannic, you'd have to do a little reflux on it. But I would love to get a hold of Cape grape and do something with that. And talk about foxy. That is a super foxy, heavy duty grape. So.
Yeah, it's
Alan,
quite delicious.
Can you sell candles of this?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Because I just keep nosing it. It's so
Yeah.
good.
Well, here comes the inappropriate joke part. The thing about Matty Gladden and the story about Matty, and we named a whiskey after a whore. So when you put that whiskey in a Catawba brandy barrel, you've perfumed a whore. It's pretty special. Just saying.
It is. Very, very special.
I love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you guys.
So, is this going to be a recurring standard product, or is this just going to be special releases, or what's the deal?
It'll be mostly special releases. We put down maybe 2 barrels of that a year just because of the expense of it. And every year I feel like I have to like go beg and plead, like, can you please let me pretend to be a great brandy distiller for a week? Like, I'm just please for like a week. Can I be a great brandy? Like
Yep.
glutton for punishment sort of thing, I guess. And,
Yep.
and also, you know, a little homage to somebody that told me one time it couldn't be done in Indiana. So
Well,
Yeah.
they were wrong.
they were.
Yeah.
They were.
Not
Yeah, that's
correct.
excellent.
Probably not the first time, but anyway. All right. Any other thoughts on? Okay. Well, explain the name of this brandy, Dionysus.
Yeah, so that was basically, you know, my spirituality and the distillation thing, it's all interconnected with the alchemist thing and the sacred and the profane idea. And so Dionysus, really, if you trace back the sort of European connections to distillation, the earliest connections you'll find were to the cults of Dionysus, using distillation as a way to celebrate his life as the dying and resurrected god through the new wine of the year. And then they would distill the old wine, but they'd use this type of crucible that was basically, it didn't have a worm on it. So the outlet, they would light that on fire and use it in parades, because in those days, if you can spontaneously produce fire and not everybody knows the parlor trick behind it, people suddenly start to believe that your god might be the correct god. So there's all these sort of connotations that tie into all the things that I'm otherwise interested in with my spirituality, things I get into on If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything, that Dionysus sort of stands for. And then there's also the metaphor for, you know, the beginning of the wine industry in the United States started here in Southern Indiana. It went away. Nobody knows about it anymore. Nobody talks about it anymore. So that's the dying and rising sort of aspect of Dionysus and Catawba brandy for me. So beautiful artwork, by the way. I thought that Brooklyn did a great job commissioning that and found that tattoo artist. And unfortunately, his name does slip my mind at the moment, but that is gorgeous artwork.
Scotty
Yeah.
Tedrow. Scotty
Yes.
Tedrow.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yep. I love the green man aspect of the whole thing and the grapes being part of his face. And you know, it's just,
Yeah.
there's a whole thing there. There's an image and a meaning to all those things. So,
yep. Good stuff.
Yeah,
I love the way you tie everything together. There's nothing that's just a throwaway.
no.
There's an intentionality with every aspect of what you do, including the naming of your spirits.
Yeah, intention and discernment, or else it's not worthwhile. There's not a project that's not worthwhile without intention or discernment.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
I believe they call that giving a shit, right? Is that the,
right. That's the Texas way of saying the long-winded bullshit that just came out of my mouth, sir. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. Let's go to this Wollersheim Bottle and Bond brandy. And Tom, I think you do 3 different brandies. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I guess I'll try to be brief on the story on this bottle and bond. But basically, we started distilling in 2010. 2009 is when Wisconsin state law changed, allowing wineries to add distilling licenses. And in 2010, my father-in-law started distilling all Wisconsin brandy using Lacrosse and St. Pepin grapes, which were actually bred here in Wisconsin in the 70s by Elmer Swenson. And producing wine, harvesting the grapes early, like you would in cognac, and producing a wine similar to the way you would in cognac, and then doing distillation and aging in brandy toasted custom Wisconsin oak barrels. And our first release of that product was 6 barrels, and we called it batch number 1, and we sold out in about 6 hours. And so that was kind of like the precipice of maybe we should build this distillery thing. And over time, as we expanded, this Cocard brandy's, this all Wisconsin approach has really been like the centerpiece of the distillery. And so like our gin and our absinthe and things like that, we're using all botanicals that can be grown here in Wisconsin. We try to source them within the state. Sometimes that's doable, sometimes that's not. But that's been like the keystone philosophy. We introduced Press House Brandy in 2016, which is our best-selling product. That's a recreation of the brandy they were making on site here pre-prohibition with those American native grapes like Catawba. And that's aged in Missouri oak, primarily Missouri oak. It's a blend of new and used barrels. And then when that came out, we were able to hit a bit of a lower price point, and that took the demand pressure off of Cocard and let us push the age up. But with the Cocard profile, I really wanted to have more of a floral, more creamy profile that was less oak dominated. But the issue with making custom Wisconsin oak barrels is you can't buy used ones. And so what I decided to do was kind of take the Cocard brandy that we originally had and kind of split that inventory in two ways. And so I took the big, bold, like wood-driven barrels, and I did a small blend of those as our bottled and bond release. And then we do single barrel picks of our older stuff for Cocard. And like I mentioned before we got started, I was expecting kind of like a pyramid shape, you know, press house on the bottom, most of the sales, and then bottle and bond, and then people would spring for that Cocard brandy the least because of the price. But what ended up happening is because the ages aren't that big of a difference and the proof or the price point isn't that big of a difference, we got like an hourglass thing going where people are trading up or they're trading down. And so this batch of bottle and bond was the last batch we did. We're going to wait a couple of years because we're pushing up the age of Cocard. Right now it's a 7-year product. And I'm hoping we did a 1 barrel at 10 years this summer that sold out, but we're hoping to have that be like a 10-year-old product in about 2 years. And then at that point, that's going to be at like the $90 or $100 price point. And then we have our other one at like the $35 price point. And so the goal would be to have bottled and bond in that middle ground.
Nice.
So right now it's temporarily on hiatus.
When you guys are, I'm presuming, still in a pretty good market for brandy where you're at. I mean, that was when I was at Copper and Kings, that was the stomping ground. You better get ready to get in the car and drive because that's where you're headed. So
yeah, we're in Wisconsin. People drink a lot of brandy here. Most of what we drink in this state is Corbel. My father-in-law always says if we can get 1% of what Corbel does in the state of Wisconsin, he'll be happy. And I remind him that if we hit 1% of what Corbel does, we need a new building.
My memory of Wisconsin is that people in bars, even the bartenders, will draw blood over trying to replace Corbel in the bars. And don't you dare tell them that the Wisconsin old fashioned is not the way that it was originally made, because that for sure will get you thrown through a window.
It is a very people are very fiercely loyal to the Wisconsin way of doing it. So as a Wisconsin brand, it's a little bit easier, but still convincing people. I mean, a handle of Corbel, I think, is $20 at my local grocery store. And so to convince people to upgrade from the good stuff at $20 a handle to $35, $40 a fifth is it's an ask, but it's our bread and butter. Press House Brandy is our best-selling product. I just emptied. We have a fooder here that we blend that in, and then we bottle from for consistency. And I'm in the process of topping it off. I put 16 barrels in today. I'm putting in 16 barrels tomorrow, and that will be like 6 months worth of brandy. So it's still our like core business.
That's your
the
thing,
whiskey and everything is also growing really well. We've really hit the ground running with brandy old fashions in a can. We did something like 2,000 cases of that this year. So people really like those. So that's
surprisingly sincerely good. Okay. A lot of the canned cocktails are trash.
Right.
Your canned old fashioned is incredibly good.
Normally, when
Right.
somebody says canned anything on any of the shows, I have a look on my face, but this time it was a look of no, a canned old. That's where you're at. That is completely respectable, and I am 100% about it.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, people want that convenience. And for us, you know, like Kevin alluded to, like most people before they try the can are very skeptical of the quality, because when you buy a canned cocktail, like generally speaking, they're not very good. Not all of them, but many of them. And the approach we take as a family business is very different from the approach a lot of other, you know, especially big brands do, where like they're like, well, we want to do a brandy old fashioned in a can, we need to hit this price point. So then you work backwards. You know, how do we get there and hit your margin? We did the opposite. It's like, we make a really good brandy old fashioned in our tasting room. Let's put it in a can and see how much it costs and see if anybody will buy it, because they're pricey. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna be shy about that. I understand that they're significantly more expensive than what else is out there, but the reaction we get from people is that, like, wow, this is the best one I've ever had, or this is the first one I've had that's ever been good. And the reason for that is because we didn't cut corners, and therefore the price is the price, and that's what it is.
Yeah. Okay, before we start talking about this, Patrick had a question.
Yeah.
What other releases has Alan released out of spite?
Everything I do is really from the deepest, darkest corner of the hateful part of my heart. I've gotten very into Jungian psychology lately, and I understand exactly what's happening to me. So stay tuned to If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. See what I did there? Cross promotion.
There you go. All right, so there's the Wollersheim
bourbon.
I pulled the wrong thing. Sorry. We do better. Here is the Wollersheim,
except it's black.
Brandy. Yeah. And our friend Fred Swanson over at Dancing Goat says that the Wisconsin old fashioned is diabetes in a glass.
Diabetes.
It's pretty accurate. They're pretty sweet.
Yeah,
not wrong, but they're good.
Yeah, so let's talk about this Wollersheim Brandy Bottle and Bond.
Well, I can tell you guys from here, the time we've been talking since this has been open, it has changed in the glass tremendously. Like the initial sort of hit in the glass for me was sort of that kind of diacetyl buttery sort of thing, that buttered popcorn sort of thing. But it has gone to almost like French pastry territory on the nose for me, like fruit-filled French pastry sort of thing. But you can also, I can detect the skins on those grapes when they were pressed. Like that skin thing is there. It's literally like being in a press house whenever you get the aroma from it. So
there's so much caramel on this. It's insane. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm getting really, really fruity. Like I would almost call this, if I were blind, I might pick this out as a rum. A mix of Jamaican, but also like Martinique rum agricole. A really fresh cane juice kind of flavor to it.
On the palate, David, yeah, like that's the first time I just tasted it, and that like that dark molasses sort of character, instead of going all the way to the back like a rum often does for me, it finishes like right at mid palate and then elevates. But yeah, there is a rum characteristic here, and it's pleasant. It's honestly almost like a sorghum molasses on the palate to me.
And that is new toasted Wisconsin oak barrels.
Dude, that's good. That is damn good.
Thank you. We work with, we used to work with Radu. We're now working with Sega Moreau for our Wisconsin oak.
I got to get I'm going to have to get a bottle of this somehow. It's going to be a thing that happens.
So good.
Yeah.
That is, and I may be misspeaking here, and I don't want to put anybody down in general out there that is a distiller, but that is one of the best American grape brandies as far as, you know, something you can get a hold of right now that's out there on the market for sure. You know, not to put down anybody, and there's some great stuff out there, but there's nothing wrong with this. This is damn good. Certainly better than Corbel. Sorry, but certainly better than Corbel.
No.
Without a doubt.
The mistake I made was I went to Wisconsin and bought this.
That's it. No, I'm just kidding.
And the mistake I made was
Wisconsin's
not going to
all right.
Wisconsin.
Okay.
Wisconsin's gorgeous. I love it. But then I fell in love with Wisconsin old fashions, brandy old fashions. And so I started making brandy old fashions with this. And then I thought, I don't need to keep doing that because I'm going to run out of this, and I've got to figure out a way to replenish. So, but it does make an outstanding old fashioned.
Man, the finish on that, like for me, it all comes back to the front, and it is literally like buttered biscuit with some fruit jam on it, and I love that. That is awesome.
And I get some honey notes that like
so big,
like orange marmalade, and as far as cocktails with the bottled and bond, we've been doing Sazeracs in the tasting room 50-50 with the rye and the bottled and bond, and the bottled and bond just adds like texture and like
Wet
half,
base,
and that rye spice. Yeah, it's just it was delicious.
That's really good stuff.
All right.
Damn. Yeah, those kind of jam jelly notes are insane that are on the finish that are left on the palates at the very end. I'm really impressed by that. And again, almost to me like a buttered biscuit sort of characteristic that it's just hanging around there. Good job, man. That's
that's delicious. That's delicious. Okay. Last but certainly not least, we're going after this sleight of hand brandy.
All right.
All right. Now, this is what the sample you have is batch 2, which is aged 100 months. So Robert's making me do math. So we're looking at a little over 8 years, right?
Yep.
You're lucky Europe doesn't have a different system for keeping track of years.
That's right.
he would have went with the metric year system.
Right. Metric calendar.
You would have been figuring out what a hecta year is.
So this particular brandy, or the sleight of hand brandies that have come out. So these came out for Denison's 175th anniversary of being a city. And so they did that, and right after Cognac turned 1,000, which is sister cities with Denison. So we had a big celebration. All the master distillers came in, and so we did 2 different blends of brandy. So this is not 100% our brandy. This is only about 30% of that 8.5-year-old brandy from us, blended with a 10-year-old cognac. So is what this is in the bottle. So the brandy that we distill, the oldest ones, the very first ones we did, was actually a locally grown Chenin Blanc. That was really fun because most of the wine growers in our area are, I wouldn't say they're not the they're people who started growing grapes because they thought it sounded really fun, and so there was no watering system or anything put in place especially for a place like Texas is kind of interesting choices to be made. The Chenin Blanc was really great, but after our second year of existence, they tore up those grapes and planted Tempranillo. Went to the old Spanish grapes. So after our second year, we took a year off, and then we found some local grapes that are being grown. We actually found a Riesling. So everything that we've made after our second year has all been Riesling that we've distilled, which Riesling is not a grape, probably Chenin Blanc either, or grapes that should be grown in our climate. It's not really not things that you would typically do, but you have some people that made some choices, 30, 40 years ago, and then they didn't water the grapes, and then they just let them kind of suffer for years, and now they produce some really, really cool stuff. So the Chenin Blanc was a really, really, really fun grape, and the Riesling, I think, Kevin, I actually sent you some Riesling as well.
Yes.
And the grapes that struggled for a really long time, and even every other year we don't get any harvest really. I mean, we may see out of 15 acres we may get 300 gallons of wine to distill. So
Wow.
yes, but like this year I think we got 1,000 gallons. The 109-degree weather wasn't super kind, even with grapes with really, really deep roots. But we for us, we're always doing some really weird stuff. Like for us, harvest is generally end of July, beginning of August is generally when we're harvesting. So we still like to leave quite a bit of acid in the grape. Everything starts waking up way earlier, so it sounds more ridiculous than it really is for on the maturation side. But the grapes do some really, really fun things. But this guy was kind of honor of the history of Denison, which a guy from our town helped kind of fix the phylloxera issue back in the day. So that's why Cognac and Denison became sister cities. A little statue of him over in Cognac. And it's why the French distillers come visit us, which is a lot of fun, getting them absolutely hammered in the barrel room tasting whiskey. So.
Ruined absinthe for all of us, Robert. God.
Yeah.
Dude, there's a lot going on at the dance here. There's like there's a solid base to this that's that mineral characteristic, and then there's a beautiful mid and a beautiful high end on it. It's here you go, Kevin. There's Rush in a glass right there. The Holy Triumvirate.
Yes.
But there's a beautiful dance going on between all those notes on the nose. I love that I can still pull that mineral out of there, but there's an American brandy aesthetic to it as well. That's much bigger, much more bold and loud and characteristic.
Oh yeah, that's the French distillers were really wanting us to use Boisé and doing some different things to it. And we told them, no, we're not gonna. We're using the bourbon rules on this guy, and we're just gonna rock it straight great,
dude.
See what happens. So
that's damn good on the palate, man. Holy shit.
Yeah, this feels very, like, in a really good way, very classic brandy, just with that American kind of kick to it. Whereas the other two are, of course, we're talking different strains, grapes that maybe we're not used to in this. With a Riesling, this just feels very familiar and very inviting, but it does have that additional bite to it, maybe from that additional acidity left in the grape. It's not overly sweet at all. And I agree, Alan, there's a lot of minerality to it, but I like it.
There's some Oloroso notes that are going on in there too. And then on the palate, the beautiful thing is you get that mineral thing on the palate that becomes almost velvety. But then for me, 3/4 of the way back, then it comes back and it's like, oh yeah, here's that American thing. And let's remind you that we're here and we have a little bit of attitude, right? And it's right. It punches through it. And I really like that a lot.
It was fun. We actually, so when we got the cognac in, we made the blend. We did the very first release at cask, which was 129 proof-ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
We then took the last half of the other half of the blend and we stuck it in some 40-year-old cognac casks that we had. And then we did slow reduction on it for a year and then released this one at 98. I think it's 98.6.
98.6, yeah.
I love how that mineral note on the nose, and it's respective to where you hold your nose at the glass, forward or backwards for me. But the further away I get from the glass, that mineral note is there again as the base note. And then all those fruit notes just danced on top of it. And it's like Oloroso sherry, a little bit of raisin sort of characteristic, maybe a little pear going on as well in there, like overripe Bartlett pear. But it's one of those that you literally just sit here all night and just go back to on the nose alone. and just smell through it. You're going to find something different every time. That's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Tom, any thoughts on sleight of hand?
I love it. It's delicious. I'm not very, that's about the extent of my contributions.
It honestly, dude, this makes me, I want to chew on this all night. Like it's the way it sets on the palate. Everything we tasted tonight was unctuous and it had mouthfeel to it, but this is at that level of have a drink of it, wait 15 minutes, have a drink of it, and come back to it. So
I love, like, for me, it's really familiar in two different ways, like that classic cognac back, but also that like American brandy back. I spent a lot of time in both those worlds, and so I really like seeing, like, it feels very familiar for two different reasons, and I'm really digging it.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with the TTB on this one for the very first release, because initially we were just going to blend the cognac and the brandy together, let it sit for a couple of weeks, and then bottle it, and we were just going to call it brandy on the label. And because in my brands, like, if you blended rye whiskey and bourbon together, then it just goes to whiskey.
Just whiskey,
right?
Yeah,
the category it kicks back to. So if I blend cognac and American brandy, then it's just brandy. That's all it is. The TTB did not agree with that statement. If we blended cognac, we could not. It was not brandy. And I was like, but cognac is brandy. They're like, it is, but it's not. And I was like, what do you mean it's not brandy? And so I had to transform the cognac into not cognac. So we actually had to put it in an American oak barrel for one day, and we pulled it out. No longer cognac.
You did the equivalent of teaspooning a scotch. That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So they allowed me to label it for the very first batch.
That would be my whole story right there, Robert. I'd be like, listen, I teaspoon this whole thing and enjoy.
Yeah, it's fun. Don't worry about it.
It's awesome. It's awesome, dude.
So Robert, what's the difference between batch 1 and batch 2 of the sleight of hand?
So batch 2 is older and lower proof. Batch 2 spent a year in those 40-year-old cognac casks being slowly reduced from that 129 down to the 98.6. So also price wise, they're different. This guy is about $50 to $60 on shelf, and when the first batch of casks came out, it was like 70 or 80. Something like that.
Okay,
dude, 50 or 60 for this is a steal for people who are really into brandy for sure.
Yeah,
that's nothing.
It's a gorgeous drink. It really is. And why? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
As unfortunately, cognac is a lot cheaper than native made brandy, so that helps out on the price point selection on that quite a bit.
Yeah. So why the name Sleight of Hand?
So for us, Sleight of Hand is kind of a series of Ironroot labeled with products that have something else blended into it. So it's trying to make sure that we're very, very clear, and especially as we go into some relabelings for stuff next year. Basically, our main goal is to make sure we have separated out the 100% distilled product versus blended product.
Such as Saint's Alley is.
Saint's Alley. So Saint's Alley is going to be going through a change this next year. So it will next year be labeled as, it'll have Ironroot on the label, but the label color will be completely different, and how it's labeled and talked about will be very different. But yeah, we had some ownership changes of the Saint's Alley brand, so we had to switch some stuff up. But as always, the goal is to try to be as transparent as possible, as the government will allow me to be on things.
Sure.
When we first did that product, the finished bourbons, I tried to put age statements on it and got slapped by the TTB. So fortunately, they've changed the rules now, so that's going to be able to change. But that was a very frustrating thing at the very beginning.
Sure. They're going to pick on you for age statements, and they're going to let Wild Turkey say up to 6 to 8 years on Wild Turkey 101. So yeah, that makes sense.
This is another one of those bottles, by the way, that would get me in trouble. This is just my wife walking into the living room at like 2:00 in the morning with me watching Hell on Wheels, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Eating unsalted crackers and drinking brandy. Why don't you go to bed?"
Okay. No, you're eating unsalted crackers, drinking brandy, and texting me. That's what's going on.
Here's a Rush link. You ever heard this one, Kevin? Here's a great bootleg from '78.
I know what's been fun is to finally get this out on market and starting to try to convert some fellow Texans into drinking brandy, moving them away from whiskey and getting them into the brandy world a little bit, especially even on cocktail wise, doing some of those split bases and doing some fun stuff with it. I think,
yeah,
we get people to drink more brandy, the world will be a little bit better place, in my opinion.
If you guys can make brandy like that down there, that's absolutely phenomenal, dude. Your whiskeys are phenomenal, and the brandy's right there with it, without a doubt. And nice touch with the cognac there. I love that you didn't let that take over, and that you let your varietals go right along with it and sing a song, and it worked out beautifully.
Yeah,
so, I appreciate it, man.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody?
Are you?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. You're laying down. You said you're laying down Riesling brandy now.
Yeah, we've been for the last 5 years laying down Riesling, and then next year it'll officially come out. And so what we've decided to do on the Riesling side is to go into a Solera with the minimum age being 6, and then as we go every vintage, we kind of are blending down into the Solera.
Sure.
That's kind of the plan. I love using fooders and doing some of that stuff. So that's a lot of what we're going to be doing over the next couple of years. Is we'll have a couple of vintage barrels that we'll pull out, but overall for that main product to start putting into the Solera method.
Yeah, I love my fooder. That's my favorite toy, I think.
Oh God, yeah. And we can use it with brandy, which bourbon's stupid. What are you gonna do?
Telling you, convert to American whiskey. We should all just convert to American whiskey and be fine.
I'm with you.
Yeah. But what would happen to my Blantons, bro?
It'd just be Blanton's American whiskey, and then you put a donkey on the topper instead of the horse. You got a whole new thing to collect, bro.
And it would taste better. There you go.
Right.
Well,
Put a buffalo on top would be more authentic.
A buffalo with a unicorn horn.
There we go.
And then you can do the allocation. Maybe a paint by numbers too. You just put the watercolor paintbrush on there with one color, and it becomes a whole. I'm just saying, you can send me a check.
Alan's a whole marketing team over here.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on.
All right. Any other final thoughts on any of the brandies we tasted, or the whiskey or the Yeast Trial Series?
Overall, great job on the rye and the brandy, Tom, and Robert and Tom both, and Kevin, David. Thank you for including me in on this whole thing, and getting the taste of those brandies was particularly pretty damn cool, because that doesn't happen very often. So thank you.
We need to get more American distilleries making brandy. That's for sure.
Yes.
And for me, I've gotten to taste plenty of Allen stuff over the years. Love it. This first taste of Dionysus, but won't be the last. Haven't gotten to taste Ironroot in many years now. So it was the first in a while, and my first tasting Wollersheim. So really appreciate tasting your guys' product, meeting you guys, and I hope to talk to you both more about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Tom, dude, you're kicking butt, man. Just keep on doing it, dude. That was great.
Yeah. I was really blown away by everything that I experienced at Wollersheim, and then trying this whiskey trial series just kind of took it to that next level. And this kind of thing is what I would like to see more distilleries do. Is here's what we've experimented with, and we want you to try it. Here you go.
Yeah.
That's the heart of craft distilling. And then you can pull from what you learn from that and create entire new product lines. And I know this doesn't happen overnight by any means, but this is fantastic in every part of it. Really is.
A little jealous of our compadre Patrick that he is so close to Wollersheim. I know he doesn't get to come out here and hang out with us as often as he'd like to, but if he wants to make us jealous, he can just send us pictures of being at Wollersheim. So without a doubt.
Yep. Like I said, I mean, I know Wisconsin's not that great and all that, David, but you guys are welcome out anytime. About a half hour north of Madison.
That should be, oh my God, that should be a whole thing. That should be your hashtag. Here's another marketing idea. That should be, you get on the Wisconsin thing, Wisconsin hashtag, we're not that great, but
we're not that great.
I've already been banned from a distillery in Tennessee. Don't ban me from another one in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm banned from one in my own state, so we do what we do.
Good company.
But in all seriousness, Tom, this stuff is fantastic that we tried here tonight. How can people get your product?
Well, we are exclusively available in Wisconsin, so you'll have to come to this great state. We're I would say 30 to 40% comes out the front door here, so that to get most of this stuff, the best place to come is here, but we do have good distribution throughout the state of Wisconsin as well.
Okay.
No, we don't do. I haven't messed around with any of those shipping websites or anything like that yet. But yeah, so we don't have any online shipping for our spirits. We do ship direct for our wines to 13 states or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
We
So
get you some online distribution for sure.
Yeah, we could hook you up with somebody if that's what you're interested in, or you can just call Patrick at My Whiskey Den, Venmo him some cash, and he'll take care of you.
Leave his Venmo is Gimp192. I believe.
Oh goodness.
First
Robert,
191 were taken.
Robert, where can people find Ironroot products?
So yeah, you can always come visit the distillery in Denison, Texas. We're in the middle of nowhere almost, but an hour north of Dallas, right on the Texas-Oklahoma border. If that doesn't work out for you, you can find us throughout the state of Texas, Beck's, Total Wine, a lot of really wonderful independent stores like Liquor King and Empire Liquors, a couple of other ones. Throughout the country, the best place to find our stuff is going to be at Total Wine. They do they took us national, so we do have a decent distribution, especially on the Saints Alley side. So
it's awesome.
There's lots of Saints Alley out there. Every now and then you'll find some Harbinger out there, and then you got to know somebody that can mule you something when you order it through the distillery. So
yeah, Jonathan keeps raising age statements, so he keeps holding that availability back on us. So
yeah. Again, the only quarrel I've ever had with Ironroot is the distribution of your product, because everything I've had has just been absolutely fantastic. I pulled out. I have a little bourbon group that I've had for maybe 5 or 6 years, and we did a tasting one night of all single barrels. So store pick single barrels. So in theory, really good whiskeys. And then end of the night, I pulled out some of it. Wasn't batch 2, it was batch 1 of this sleight of hand, and had a couple guys try it. And I'm like, why have you been hiding this all night? This is the best thing we've had the entire evening.
That's right.
And
brandy. That's right.
Yes. Here's a brandy from Denison, Texas. That's the best thing you've had all night, and you've been trying Knob Creek single barrels and Russell's Reserve single barrels, and you name it. and this is the best thing you had all night. So you're doing some great stuff there, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Alan, where can people buy your stuff?
Bourbon's good, but brandy's better. First of all, just throw that out there. So you can find our stuff through what is it? Mash Networks is where our online distribution is nowadays, and you can find that I think in like 48 states or something of that nature. You can also find us in multiple states where we are distributed, but I do not have them memorized. I basically end up always saying like Texas and Louisiana are the two big states for us for whatever reason. And in Canada of all
Because
places.
we love your things.
I know, man. I like Indiana was such a late adopter of what we're doing and what we're still doing to this point. And I'm like, people in Texas like us. And then everybody's like, well, why don't you go down there? So one of these days, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. You can check me out at, again, thealchemistcabinet.com, One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute on YouTube, Distillers Talk, wherever you get your podcast. And if you have ghosts, you have everything. There's some cool stuff coming up. Kevin, you'll appreciate there's an episode coming up. The first episode of season 4, probably mid-December, is the president of the Friends of Eastern Cemetery Society, and we don't go into really the paranormal or anything. We just talk about Eastern Cemetery and the problems that that's had in Louisville, Kentucky, and how people can get involved in trying to restore that cemetery and bring some peace to the people who have their loved ones buried there. And it was a pretty special episode I recorded last night with him and really enjoyed. So
very cool. I've heard a rumor that I'm supposed to be on there on that show at some point, but
yeah, that's happening. But we have to get together in person because you know how it goes. We go south, but we got to record it.
We're going to drink far too much of probably something we've had tonight, and then I'm going to try to proselytize the public. So that won't go well. But
if it's meaningful to you in any way, shape, or form, I will say this: every bottle that I normally empty with people, unless it's part of our group, I throw away. But all the bottles I've emptied with you, they're on the souvenir shelf. So there's that.
Oh, now Mike throws out this comment. I'm not really sure I know what it means.
To be on a blanket. Wow.
Jonathan sucks. He's not even good looking enough to be on a blanket.
Well,
oh God. Is there a ginger joke in here? Because I feel like there's some sort of like weird hair joke going on.
They made a really wonderful blanket for me by superimposing my face on a certain photo of a person laying in front of a fireplace many years ago, and my mother-in-law has now seen it. And thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
I had to sign a piece of paper at work one time because Mike Lissack made a really cool meme about Larry Bird. That was the whole thing that happened.
Yeah. From Spirits of French. Oh, Lord, dude.
Yes.
Oh, it was the whole thing. I'll take the blame for it. It was worth it. It was still fun.
Yeah. David, tell us again where everybody can find you on social media and the good stuff that you do.
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Whiskey in My Wedding Ring. At Whiskey Ring on Twitter, X, whatever they're calling it today or when you're listening.
Sure.
I also have a store on Mash Networks where got a single barrel out right now from barrel, but later or earlier next year, we're going to have one from Alan in Spirits of French Lake. And I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yes.
That can all be found through whiskeyinmyweddingring.com and listen to Whiskey Ring Podcast wherever you find your podcasts.
Yeah.
Real quick here too, David, I just wanted to say congratulations on all the success that you found and doing the single barrels. What you're doing is awesome, and we're happy to have you as part of Bar Cart Co-op, man. It's great to have you. So
thank you, man. Happy to be part of it.
Yep. This was a Jack Daniel's barrel proof rye that David did that I was fortunate enough to procure a bottle. And dude, I always say the best thing that Jack Daniel's does is rye and barrel proof. And this holds up to that without a doubt. So congratulations on that.
We just had someone break down the 2 barrels that we had from those today because they're going to be made into furniture. There was so much charcoal in there. It was beautiful. And one of the barrels 3 months after dumping was still wet enough to drink out of.
Amen.
Awesome.
Amen.
That's awesome. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate each and every one of you for taking up your time this evening for this event. I hope you enjoyed it half as much as I did. And Tom, thank you for the vision to do the Yeast Trial Series. I hope that more distillers will do things like this, do experiments like this, and present it to the public for them to see the different things that you can do. And
thank you guys for all the great ideas for future experiments.
Yeah, we'll keep you busy.
Rye in a gin barrel.
Yeah,
rye in a gin barrel. I've heard that's a thing.
It will be.
And Robert, thank you for being here. Anything you can get your hands on from
a bunch of whiskey and brandy samples, I'm here. So you just
we'll do this again at some point because I think the brandy segment is going to continue to evolve and develop within craft distillers, and the quality level. I mean, we tasted 3 different ryes tonight that were the same mash bill, same cooperage, same age, and the taste profiles on each was very different. And then we tasted 3 brandies that were also incredibly different, one from the other, but all exceptionally good and fun to drink. And that's what makes this fun. You know, it doesn't all need to taste like Kentucky bourbon. It just doesn't.
Thank God.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
Tom, keep doing what the hell you're doing. Alan, you already know that you're friggin' amazing, so I don't have to butter you up too much. But man, I'm blown away tonight. Seriously.
Same. That brandy's good, dude. That's
it's great to try other American brandies. Both delicious. Loved it. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Yeah. Well, appreciate everybody. Appreciate your time. Thanks to the folks that tuned in tonight. We will share this on video so you can tune in again if you want to watch it over, or if you want to share it with friends, they can catch up with us. But incredibly good stuff tonight, and not one bit of it was a bourbon. Which is kind of cool. But again, thank you all very much for being here. Cheers. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
Cheers, everyone.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Good night.